Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app on a Thursday. A Thursday where apparently we're talking about Ron Rivera's comments about Rivera-Bieniemy, which is kind of emblematic of why this blew up as a story in the first place. Anthony Haney, of course, super producer of this fine radio program, along for the ride on this Thursday. We're very bored this time of year. I think we've said this a couple times off air. I don't know if I've said it on. But this is the time last year that I was ramping up for my wedding. And from a pure content standpoint, nevertheless, that I was about to marry the love of my life and get to go to a castle in Scotland with, 30 of my closest friends and family and have what turned out to be even beyond our wildest dreams of a great time. Didn't know that at the time. Was hoping. But considering it went beyond the wildest dreams, how could I have known? That was all great, but I also just couldn't wait to get out of this time of year where there is nothing but speculation. Because unlike July, where we understand there's nothing happening, we look for meaning in everything this time of year. So I don't know what the hell y'all did when I left last year, when Scott and Doc and Linnell and whoever else was filled in. I guess I'm about to find out these next couple of weeks. At least we have a preseason game tomorrow, which is still not very much, but it's more than we've had. But it's how what should be a maybe 24-hour story, maybe 36, because Ron, I think rightfully, considering the firestorm that it caused, apologized for what he said, even if I still stand by the fact that he really didn't do that. Like, his sins were clumsy and they weren't mortal. This story's entering day 3. And now you get the theories. Why? Which leads us to our friend who just left us. The one, the only, cock-a-doodle-doo, Chris Russell. Anthony, did you hear what the Rooster was saying at the end of his show? And I hope I heard this right. I don't want to mischaracterize. I don't want to take the Rooster out of context. Did you hear what he said, though?
I was in and out of the studio, so I didn't quite frankly hear his words exactly. But we do have a stream, so. Yeah,
so if you would like to hear the Rooster verbatim, you can rewind in the free Odyssey app. That is how that works. But he's not the only person that I've heard say this. Or at least reference it if he was just referencing it in passing and I missed it as we were preparing for our show. It wasn't like I was intently listening, so I will admit that on the front end. But the theory itself is more what I'm after than going after Chris. Chris is my friend. He's a lovely human. There is this theory going around that what Ron Rivera did was in some ways calculated or intentional to more or less put Rivera-Bieniemy in his place. Because he is in this wackadoodle position that if he succeeds, a lot of people think that he won't get any of the credit, he being Ron Rivera. That if this team succeeds, it's going to be because the offense is good, or good enough at least, and that next year, Rivera-Bieniemy will get elevated to the head coach so they don't lose him. Something that, as Mike Florio wrote in Pro Football Talk, is not unprecedented in NFL history. In 20-something, 2010, 2012, actually it might have been later. It might have been like 2015. I don't remember the year. Lovie Smith was the coach of the Bucs. And they were about to lose Dirk Cutter, their offensive coordinator. And they did not want to do that. They were like, Dirk Cutter is our guy. And we think he's the future. Turned out he was not, but they didn't know that at the time. And so they fired Lovie Smith and kept Dirk Cutter. And Dirk Cutter had a pretty up and down, mostly down, couple of years as head coach, and then they fired him and moved on to someone else. And there is a thought in many NFL circles that is exactly what is about to happen to Ron Rivera. That no matter what happens this year, Rivera's out because either it's bad and he gets fired, or it's good and he gets boosted so that Bieniemy doesn't wind up going somewhere else because they like him here. I don't think that's such a crackpot theory, but it's also one that I don't think Ron Rivera is acting upon now, nor does he have any control over. And I think that part is something that Ron, for all the things that seemingly he doesn't know, sometimes seems to have real blind spots on where the landmines are when talking to the media. And there are countless examples of that, which we'll circle back to in a moment, that this is just an example, or this is people putting something on him in a very, very sinister and unbecoming way, frankly, that I just do not think is true. I flat out do not believe that Ron Rivera is doing some mastermind calculation so that Josh Harris picks him at the end of the year and then lets Rivera-Bieniemy walk, but hey, at least I got my job. We're all good here. That's not, I think, what Ron's about. It's not something I think he's capable of doing. Not a shot at him, just like Josh Harris is his own man in his first year owning a new team, and he's been around the block a few times in a lot of different leagues. Josh Harris is no dummy. He is not getting manipulated by Ron Rivera or pretty much anybody else. And so that's that. And Anthony, when we were talking about this before the show, like, your laughter was fantastic. Because what was your point?
I mean, my point is Ron often does this. Like, he often, speaks out and is forced to go back and clean up his mess. You think about, his quarterback comment last year about, well, I don't know if it was about Carson Wentz. He said it wasn't. But the media asked him what's the difference between all the other teams in the division and their success early on. And he said quarterback, and that led everybody in the media to speculate, oh, he must be talking about Carson and the woeful start that he had. And then also you think back about to January where, he damn near forgot that we could have been.
Damn near did.
he did forget.
There was nothing. Actually, he didn't forget. He didn't know in the first place. You can't forget something you don't know.
That we could have, been eliminated from the playoffs. So this isn't, the first time Ron has had to, walk back some comments and clean up his mess. This is just Ron. This is just who he is at the end of the day.
Yes. Like, Ron Rivera, I don't know if I want to be nice. Like, I don't want to. Actually, it's not even that I want to be nice. I don't want to be mean. Ron has some blind spots.
Yes.
There's been a lot of evidence of that here in Carolina throughout his career. There are some blind spots, and those blind spots tend to be, as a head coach at least, where the landmines are when it comes to media settings. There are certain things where if he blows one up, he's on edge for a couple weeks, and he'll be like, oh, you're not getting me on that. And it's like, we're not trying to get you. We're just asking you questions, man. If you say something stupid, like, that's not on us. And I'm not endorsing going full Belichick because that's terrible, right? I'm not entering that next question. Like, screw you, man. Like, you're not protecting state secrets. I was actually listening to a great podcast. Dan Le Batard does these long-form interviews called South Beach Sessions. They're phenomenal. And he did one with Roy Wood Jr., the comedian. You know what I'm talking about?
Roy Wood.
He's the correspondent on The Daily Show.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Did the White House Correspondents' Dinner recently. And Roy has done some stuff for the ESPN, and, he's a huge sports guy. And Roy talked about in this podcast how if you go to a politician, someone who's doing something that actually matters to millions and millions of people in terms of the policies that they enact, right? And you're like, I think your policy sucks. I think you're a fraud. Like, the meanest, like, nastiest version of the criticism that you can give. And you say it right to their face, they'll talk with you. And they'll be like, well, I think you're wrong because X, Y, Z. And they'll, like, just take it and go. If I were to go to an NFL coach and be like, yo, your game plan sucks, they would not react to that criticism well. And that's the funny thing is, like, these guys, these coaches often protect, like, and we then act like it, right? We then act in a way that suggests, like, oh, yeah, they're doing something so important. It's sports, and this is the game part. This isn't even the like, yes, it involves people's livelihoods, but, like, this is supposed to be the fun part. And then people, like, work themselves up into a tizzy, and I don't know, man. It's just, the point is, this is very characteristic for Ron Rivera. I do not think he's being manipulative and putting EB in his place. And I think, I'm just going to say it. I think if you think that, you're giving Ron too much credit. That's just where I'm at. Like, you're not giving him enough credit as a human being. You're giving him too much credit as some manipulative mastermind. But you are not also, in fairness to him, here's the nice part, in case Ron's listening, in case anyone from the Commanders is listening, which I just always assume that they are, but not necessarily Ron. Although, Ron, if you're listening, sup. You're not giving him enough credit as a human being who would do that to Rivera-Bieniemy. That's a no-go. But mastermind, manipulating, come on. No. No. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. That's all, except for a quick touch on it later. I think I want to ask Scott Allen about this. He's going to join us later in the show. You got Take Command, game preview style, coming up at 5 o'clock today. But next, ESPN Insider did a piece proposing 5 trades he would like to see. Seth Walder's the guy's name. He did a 5 trades he would like to see before the season column, and one of them is a Chase Young trade, and there was a point in it that I had never heard before that actually opens me up at least a little bit more than I previously had been to the idea. We'll tell you Seth's thoughts. We'll give you the trade proposal, and we'll take your calls on it next. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Also live on the free Odyssey app. This is what happens when you try to talk and type at the same time. Really just crushing it over here. ESPN.com put out an article this morning from Seth Walder. Walder is one of their senior NFL folks who is an insider and also their analytics, top analytics NFL person. And he proposed 5 trades that he would like to see before the season could start. So, hey, let's get this done now. Last trade that was made in the NFL was last month. The Jets traded Denzel Mims to the Lions, wide receiver. And so, as Seth writes, we decided to kickstart things, play matchmaker, and throw out some ideas that make sense for both teams. One of them involves the Commanders. We'll get to that one in a second. First, Buccaneers trade for quarterback Trey Lance. That is interesting, to say the least. It makes a lot of sense. If I'm San Francisco and I can recoup some value for Lance, I think I'm interested in that. San Francisco receives 2024 second-round pick, 2024 third. The Bucs get a flyer and by the way, they would also receive a second and a sixth. So it's like a second-round pick swap and then a third for a sixth and Lance. But the big thing is that Lance, at just 23 years old, high upside play for the Bucs. The Niners obviously gave up a ton to go get him. They get a little bit of draft capital back in a year where they've already got Brock Purdy, who they're hoping can be their quarterback for the future. And they've got Sam Darnold, who looked all right at the end of the year against Carolina and, is super talented, former top pick. Is a guy that I think under Kyle Shanahan could do some things. And you've got, you don't need 3 at that point. You don't need 3 kind of project quarterbacks. So can you get something back from Lance? For Lance, fine. I don't know if I love it. I still might try to play out camp and see if Lance is going to be the guy you thought when you traded all that stuff up for him in the first place. The Jets trading for Mike Evans from Tampa. I think that probably would be a good idea. They've got a million receivers that all played for Aaron Rodgers before. In New York, it seems like, plus Garrett Wilson, who's the best young wide receiver in football. So getting a guy like Evans at this point in his career, you've only got, you need him for 2 years. That's Aaron Rodgers' window. He's 30, probably got about 2 years of really good production left. You want to give up a 2024 fourth and 2025 second to do it. It's a little bit of heavy price, that second, but I think if you're the Jets going all in, not a bad idea. Jags trading for O-lineman Patrick McCary from the Ravens. We're not going to talk about the Jags and O-lineman. Titans trading for Hunter Renfrow. Look, if you're trying to build an actual passing game in Tennessee, bringing in DeAndre Hopkins and Hunter Renfrow, you can do a lot worse. I just don't know if the Titans are going to be any good this year. So why would you give up draft capital? That seems very silly to me. And then Anthony, there's this one. The Washington, how do you say this? Commanders. They are the Commanders. Receive a 2024 third and a 2024 fifth for defensive end Chase Young. Ooh. Here's the explanation. Hard to imagine the Commanders want to pay all 4 of their defensive linemen, with Allen and Payne already paid and Sweat on his 5th-year option. And the team is obviously already not picked up the 5th-year option. Assuming that's right, the Commanders could have Young play out the season. If he plays well, the Commanders will get the benefit of that performance plus a potential compensatory pick if he walks in free agency. The problem is, and this is the thing that I didn't know, the problem is that the Commanders currently sit with almost $82 million in cap space in 2024, the 3rd most in the league per roster management system. And they figure to be players in free agency, which could make them ineligible for comp picks. So my rationale for shutting down any Chase Young trade was always, you're never going to get more than a third, and you're always going to get a third back if he's good anyway, because you're going to get a compensatory pick. This pushes that away and says, well, no, actually, we might not get that third. So you might lose Chase Young for nothing. And this gets you a third guaranteed. So it's not, hey, if he totally bombs this year and you only get a fifth because he signs a low money deal next year somewhere in free agency, you only get like a fifth rounder. No, now you get a third. It's going to be a higher third because the compensatory picks are after all the other picks. And you get a fifth. It's at least intriguing. Anthony, where do you fall on it?
I feel like with the Bradley Beal situation, that was a deal where, we should have sold high and we failed to do so. And with Chase, you don't want him to walk without getting something in return. But, Craig, I'm optimistic that Chase is going to have a bounce back year. Yes, I think, it's smart to try to get something in return, but I'm thinking this is going to be the guy for us for the foreseeable future. And I'm putting all my money in him.
So is that you advocating for Chase over Montez long term? Because that's spicy.
I mean, it is spicy just because Montez has been, very durable. He's gotten really close to, getting sacks. He's had a ton of QB pressures. Like, his production has definitely, it definitely does speak for itself. But, again, we drafted this guy second overall. We know what he can do. We know what he can be. Granted, he hasn't had the production we wanted to see the last 2 years, most of that due to injury. But, again, I'm willing to wait. I'm not willing to, jump the gun and just sell on him so fast. That's not where I am on him right now.
Yeah. I would like to do some math.
Okay. Let that math.
The good news is, because it's me and math, I've got a commercial break to do it. Because there's a couple of flaws in this argument that I think I can poke a couple holes in. But while I do that and I prepare my math, let's get some folks lined up to talk about it. 301-230-0980. Here's the trade on the table. You get to play Washington. Baltimore calls. Ring. Hello? Yes, Martin Mayhew. This is whoever the hell is the GM in Eric DeCosta. He's the GM in Baltimore, right? I want to say Ozzie Newsome, but it's been Ozzie for a long time. Hey, Martin Mayhew. This is Eric DeCosta in Baltimore. I want to talk to you about trading for Chase Young. Yeah, I would like to give you a third and a fifth in this year's draft for Chase. Hey, all right, Eric. All right, let me switch now. The phone's in this hand. Yeah, Eric. I'll give you an answer after the break. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980 on this proposed trade that ESPN.com thought up, Seth Walder specifically. I always love that we do. ESPN thought of a trade. Oh, the company of 10,000 employees, it took all of them to come together? No, Seth Walder, their ESPN analytics guru. He said Chase Young to Baltimore for a third and a fifth. Before we get to the calls, we got a couple, but we got a couple more lines open. 301-230-0980. There's this prevailing thought that you can't sign all four guys. Two, you are definitely losing Chase or Montez for nothing if you don't trade one. Both are incorrect. What? Oh my God! Well, let me slow down. It's me doing math here, Anthony, so there's a chance that we're wrong. That is a built-in part of this. But hear me out on this. So, currently, you have two guys expiring. So, what happens if all these meetings that are happening between Ron Rivera, Martin Mayhew, Marty Herney, Eric Stokes, Ron Rivera, everybody else, and Josh Harris and the new ownership group come to an agreement that signing Montez Sweat right now is a smart move? Well, okay then. Cool. Sign Montez up. He's a tremendous football player with a long track record of success. I think that's a good idea. I would endorse that. I would endorse signing Montez Sweat right now. I think he's been phenomenal so far in training camp. And if Josh Harris is sitting in, watching tape with the coaches, trying to get an understanding of things, just, watching how they work, or he's out at practice, like he's seen big number 90 do a lot of really good stuff. So let's sign him up long term. Feel pretty good about it. A-okay. Well, now you've got options this offseason, because now with Montez under contract, or even if you can get him there before the franchise tag deadline, like they did with Daron Payne this year, or maybe they franchised Payne for 5 seconds and then did it, or did they even wind up franchise tagging him?
I don't think they franchise tagged him.
But if you can do it before the deadline, right, before you have to tag him, now you can tag Chase and you can trade him, work out a trade. Are you going to get the multiple first-round picks? Like, you're not getting an exclusive tag. You're doing the non-exclusive. You see if you can work out a trade. But, let's say this defense is top 5 and you want to keep it together for one more year. Next year, you pay Chase, you pay them all, but it's 1 year's worth, and you don't lock Chase in long term. That seems feasible for a team that's going to have the third most cap space in the entire league next year. Okay, Chase, you had a good year. You're worthy of that franchise tag. Go do it again. Well, now we're in 2025 at that point?
Yep.
He's entering his final year of his contract in 2025 at the age of 30.
John Allen?
That is correct. Now, complicating factor, we'll admit there's a chance that John Allen wants to restructure before then. Now that all these other defensive tackles are signing, does John Allen go like, hey, let's rethink this a little bit? That would throw a wrench into the equation. But they don't have to. And so John Allen is set to make $14 million this year, $14 million next year, and $15.5 in the final year of his contract. And honestly, the Commanders could probably restructure in 2025, tack on, let's say, 2 more years, bring the cap number down in year 1. And now we're doing this all over again. And while it seems preposterous that you might want to move on from John Allen or Daron Payne in 2 or 3 years because they are 2 phenomenal players, what are the chances all these big dudes keep producing at this level for another 4 to 5 years? I'm not saying it's the best use of resources. I'm not necessarily endorsing just blindly signing them up. But I do think that there is a way to stagger this a little bit to make it not unfeasible to carry some of these guys longer than just this year. That's all I'm saying. And depending on what happens with this year, like, you could have a different coaching staff making those decisions. So on top of sacrificing a year of Chase, and by the way, planning all offseason to have him, and it's not like James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill couldn't step up and play just like they did last year, but you've planned to have him. There is a cost to that, and I would argue that that cost is more than a fifth-round pick. So even if you lose him for nothing, you get this year, and if he's good this year and helps you make the playoffs, like, that's good. This is not the NBA where there's 12 roster spots and losing anybody of significance for nothing is catastrophic to your team building. It's not. It's a different league. It's a different sport. And I do think that there are some NBA adjacent roster building things where the NFL could learn a thing or two. And sometimes it is training a player a year early, when you could get multiple first-rounders for him and you're not going to win a championship. Call it the Bradley Beal. Oh, my God, what a sneeze that was. Woo! Woo! Feel better now. But this ain't Bradley Beal. Like, this is Chase Young. You're not selling high 2 years ago when you were not that good. You're selling low when you're trying to ascend. For what? That doesn't... Selling when you're selling low is not the time to sell. It's when you want to buy. So by nature, you're losing. You would seem to be losing the trade unless this is actually not the bottom and Chase Young just stinks now, in which case, yeah, trade him. But how are you supposed to know that? And I think based off what we've seen in training camp, looks pretty good to me. 301-230-0980. That, of course, is the Ace Law listener line. In a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888 Ace Law. Let's get to it. Let's go to Robert in Cape Town. Robert, thanks for holding. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Great. Thanks for taking my call.
You got it.
I've been hoping and dreaming of a trade like this since the spring after Chase's rookie year. When I read I don't know if you recall this, there was an article in the Post, an interview with Chase about what he was doing in California. Instead of being at the OTAs and stuff with the Commanders. And the answer from Chase was, well, I've got a lot of commercials I've got to film. I've got a lot of, appointments to keep, and this is where that happens. And so I got to be out here. And I got my own trainer, so it's all cool. And, I've got to keep in mind that I'm not just a football player anymore, but I'm also a businessman.
Yes.
And to me, I put that together with his attitude, that attitude plus his attitude on the field, where he's a real attention hog. He's, like the camera. He invites the camera. And some people call that enthusiasm. Some people call it
Robert, I'm gonna pause you there for a second because
sure. Yeah.
I'm out there at training camp practice every day, and I can tell you that stuff that you're ascribing to him to being a camera hog, I'm guessing the cheering on and all that kind of stuff, like Chase does that in a closed practice with no camera and no fans. He does that on days that the media is not there. Like, that's who he is.
Yeah.
That's authentic.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm not saying it's just for the games. He wants the attention from whoever's there,
or it's vocal leadership.
Or it's hot dogging,
Or it's authentic to who he is. Like, you're ascribing it to your own perspective, but, also, I don't know if you're aware how short NFL careers are and what the earning potential is, but yeah, if he is a businessman, like, everything you said that you're ascribing to him as negative, I just look as part of the deal. And these guys do all have independent trainers, and they work mostly with them in the off season because that's how you stay in shape for the season. And if Chase wants to have a plan to continue to do that, like, I, for one, as someone who's covered the league for a long time, and by the way, knows a lot of private trainers who do an excellent job, I got no problem with it. Like,
all right. Well, I mean, that's fine.
And we can disagree on this. I'm just saying, like, nothing you said is actually convincing me that my position that, like, nothing you said strikes me as wrong or problematic or negative or a reason to trade him.
I just see a big difference between how he does things and how he behaves and the way the other linemen do what they do.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm gonna let you go because we got some other folks lined up. That is true, but Chase is a different guy. Like, Chase has a level of superstardom to him that others don't. And if he wants to monetize off of that, I will not begrudge him for doing so. Like, Von Miller's in soup commercials, and nobody's mad at Von Miller. Why? Because Von Miller's awesome. And if Chase Young had produced, sure. And if you think that this stuff is getting in the way of him producing, there's no way to prove it one way or the other. That's kind of the nature of these things. There's no button that hits, and it's different for every person. Maybe there are, like, is there times on the field that Chase maybe played selfishly? Sure, but, like, so did the other guys. They all, in that first half of 2021, were a mess. They all seem to not be on the same page. And whether you ascribe it to selfishness, to confusion, to lack of communication, to poor coaching, to who knows what other factors were happening, they were not on the same page. And in that scenario, it's easier to point at the guy who's done the stuff that's louder than John Allen, who just likes to go home to his wife who's made him a nice dinner. And by the way, it's very nutritious because she majored in exercise science and nutrition. And he likes to tell that story. I would too if I was a professional athlete and I was proud of my wife and what she did, and what she did helps me. That'd be awesome. I'm not a professional athlete. So there's that. John Allen and Deron Payne are not spotlight guys. They're not, and really Montez Sweat is not either. Not a spotlight guy. They got beaten down by Nick Saban, any spotlight desire they wanted in them. And Chase is. Sure. But there's plenty of spotlight guys that have also been good football players. And those two things are not Venn diagrams that overlap. People who want the spotlight and people who are good at football. And I do not think, like, I think Chase has had other issues. Some of them, obviously, the biggest one being health. Like, he had a very, 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 very traumatic knee injury. And I say traumatic not in terms of, like, oh, his mental whatever. Like, the actual, like, trauma to his knee was severe. Multiple things broken and needed to be repaired and then ultimately rehabbed. And that has a lot to do with it. And I will also say I don't know that Chase has taken every correct step along the way, but he's a young man, and if he's learned from it, the best is still ahead of him. And so I would have a hard time selling low on that. It seems like I am in the minority. We'll take more calls and find out next. 301-230-0980. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/at the Team 980. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that. That way, it makes it pretty easy to watch the show. All you do, open up your YouTube app or go to youtube.com, and it'll be pretty much the first thing there, unless you're subscribed to a zillion channels that are all going live at the same time. But YouTube does favor the live content. It says, hey, you might want to watch this right now. It's happening right now. So whether that is on your phone or your computer or your tablet, or my favorite, on the smart TV, just open up the YouTube app, and then you watch this just like a TV show. And most TVs these days, your Rokus, your Amazon Fire TVs, your Google Android TVs, Apple TV, whatever you got, it makes it quite easy to do so. Just subscribe on YouTube to the Team 980, and then we stream live there, full show, 4 to 7, each and every day. Coming up at the top of the hour, we will have Take Command for you. Logan and I previewing the game tomorrow, what we want to see. So we'll do that in just a few minutes. Right now, though, a few more calls, 301-230-0980 on Chase Young. The proposed trade from ESPN.com, Seth Walder, is Baltimore sends a third and a fifth to Washington, Young to Baltimore. Let's go to Gary and see what he thinks. Gary, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
Thanks a lot for taking my call. I think that the trade should be made, and here's the reason why. You look at the success of the draft that they had last year, which we believe is going to be a successful draft. Got a decent young running back, and they think they got the quarterback of the future. Chase Young, unfortunately, has not lived up to his generational tag that he didn't put on himself, that the media and everybody put on him. But he's not going to be that guy. Even if you look at his rookie year had some great plays. But when you draft somebody to be the second overall pick, you expect him to put the quarterback on his rear end, okay? And Chase, if you look at his sacks his rookie year, he didn't do anything really remarkable to get those sacks. He had a lot of sacks that were untouched. He was untouched. Quarterback slid, underneath him after there was pressure on the quarterback. I just don't think he's ever going to be the guy that people hope he's going to be. And for that reason, I think that they should trade him. They've already invested a lot of money in the defensive line, and they played very well without him last year. So is Chase Young worth two younger players that you're going to add to your roster next year over them? I don't think he is. I think he's going to be a very good player, potentially, but I just don't think he's ever going to reach that level of being a transformational player. I just don't think it's going to happen. So they need to get what they can for him. I agree with you, a 3 and a 5. You would prefer to be a 2 and a 4, but they've done well in the draft. And I think that they could add 2 young players next year to go along with a very young, deep roster. So I think they should go ahead and trade him.
Gary, that is a really compelling argument. I appreciate the call. One of the things that's in Seth's piece that I think is interesting, kind of making the case of why Baltimore might want to take the flyer on Young. They've obviously done a lot of work on the interior of their defensive line. They just extended Broderick Washington, but their outside guys are not great. But if you look at Chase's underlying numbers, Gary's 100% correct. The sack numbers have not been what you'd hope for Chase, although he does have some forced fumbles and like some of the Chase Young game-changing type of stuff on his resume. Even as a young player, where you're like, oh, God, if he can do that more consistently, that guy's going to be a nightmare. But 22.5% pass rush win rate at edge in 2020, that was the 7th best in the league. Got to finish, but you think that over time he'll get better at that. But 7th best edge, or pass rush win rate in the entire league as a rookie is pretty good. And then we think of his 2021 as terrible, and it was not good. And there's some schematic things, that kind of tactical things, if you will, that you point to and be like, yeah, not assignment discipline and like all that kind of stuff. But as a pass rusher, he had a 19% win rate, and that's above average. Now, last year, only 5% win rate coming off the injury, but I think he was kind of asked to do some different things last year. He was playing a lot more, really focused, I think, on kind of that discipline and keeping the quarterback in the pocket and all that kind of stuff. And he didn't have the explosiveness. So, it was kind of more of an approach of, hey, man, just do your job. Do not try to win. Just don't lose, and do not lose contain in the limited number of reps that he had. And And so I don't really look much into that 5%. I see what he's doing at training camp. I see the one-on-ones. I see some of the stuff he's been able to do in team situations. And I'm like, okay, it's good. But if you are of the opinion, and this is a decision they have to make as a scouting department as much as anything. If you're of the opinion that he's just never going to get there, that this is kind of who he is. He's a fine player that's not going to get a ton of upside. Like, the third and the fifth actually becomes a value because you would just get a third for the compensatory pick if you even get that next year, and you're not losing. Like, if he's a slightly above average player, like, are you really that much worse off with James Smith-Williams, who is a very, very good player, very solid, like, not explosive pass rusher? Casey Toohill, who, by the way, as a pass rusher, has looked much better in this camp, but it's same kind of thing, super solid, will do the job. And you already have KJ Henry and Andre Jones, the 7th-round rookie who's flashed a couple of times in camp. Okay, like, I can hear that argument. That, to me, makes sense. My problem would be you've kind of anticipated having Chase this season. You've built everything as if these two edges are going to be there, at Sweat and Young, who, by the way, are also close friends. Do you want to make that move now? You don't have time to smooth it over with the rest of the room. If Montez has feelings about it, it's the business at the end of the day. Like, he would get it. I don't think Montez would cheer for Chase in Baltimore, but he wouldn't like be mad at the organization. But, it'd be jarring, I guess is what I would say. Is it worth whatever drop in production you would get, which there would be some? And by the way, for a defense that's trying to make turnover-worthy plays, Chase is a guy who has a knack for that in a way that some of the others don't. And is it worth the disruptive nature of what it would mean to trade him and the talk about it and changing everything on your defense that you had built with him in mind at this point in camp? That's a harder sell for me. But Gary made some interesting points. I appreciate that. I think that's going to have to do, unfortunately, for the calls for right now. Might get back to some later in the show. It's why we want you to listen as long as you can. Tell your friends and everything. Try to take some more calls as we get into football season. 301-230-0980. The Ace Law listener line. In a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888 Ace Law. When we get back, take command time here on the Hoffman Show. We are, let's see, it'll be 7:30. It's about 5 o'clock now. 2.5 hours plus 20. We're 26.5 hours from kickoff of the preseason. What is Logan Paulson looking for when it does kick off? And he'll be on the sidelines in Cleveland tomorrow. You'll hear next on the Team at 980.
The Team 980 is always live on the free Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app on this Thursday. I swear on Tuesday it felt like we would never get here, but we made it. We're at Thursday. We are just over 24 hours at this point, about 26 and a half hours away from Game 1 of the Commanders preseason. Our show, by the way, will go all the way till 7:30 tomorrow. So we take you right up till kickoff on the Hoffman Show / the pregame show, which I think we might be calling the Take Command pregame show, which would be appropriate because we're about to play you some of Take Command. Logan and I obviously broke down not just what we want to see tomorrow, but kind of what we want to see on the preseason on a larger scale. Because we are looking at the 3 games here as a series, right? It's a series to get ready for the season. So we talked about not just, hey, okay, tomorrow we want to see Sam Howell play well. Okay, cool, good chat. But what do you want to see over these 3 games, and how do we think they ultimately will go? That is the crux of Take Command. We also did have Chick Hernandez on the show if you want that. Or if you want Logan's take on the Bieniemy Rivera saga, you got to listen to the full episode, which is available on all the places it's available. So podcast platforms, YouTube, etc. right now. But for the meat and potatoes, actually really it's just the meat, not even the potatoes. For the meat of the football of the episode, it's time for Not My Beat.
Today's top.
Dude, I don't have it in either email.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
And we have a party foul where the email file didn't send. So, quick stall, Anthony. What do you want to see from Sam Howell tomorrow, now that the email file is sending? I'm just kidding. We're gonna see Howell play for a couple series. It'll be great. I'll also tell everybody that Scott Allen is going to join us later in the show. That will be fun. Also, something we touch on in here. Here's an actual piece of information that's not just rain delay theater, if you will. We talked about our August hero, the Rashad Ross Award, if you will, who is the person that is going to be the preseason hero in this episode. And that's what we're going to talk about on the back half of the hour. So be thinking of your preseason hero, and you'll give us a call at 301-230-0980. We'll spark your ideas at the end of this segment. But alas, without any further ado, here is the Take Command preview of preseason game number 1. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. That is Logan Paulson. Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. That is Logan Paulson. I am Craig Hoffman. Chick Hernandez, again, going to join us at the back end of the pod. So you and Chick are on the call with B. Mitch on Friday. As you mentioned, you had all the production meetings and stuff today. What are you expecting offensively, defensively, snaps, strategy, whatever you can share, top line items as you walk out of the meetings? Let's start with the offense. You walk out of the meeting with EB, sprinkle in whatever Ron said. What's the most interesting thing to you to look forward to on Friday?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing is just like the standard that they're trying to see from the guys. And it's kind of like what we talked about earlier in the week, like how it's not going to be perfect, but they want to see how guys handle adversity. They want to see how sharp it is. They want to see the tempo. They want to see the finish and the strain that's required to be a good football team in the NFL. And I think that's something that I can totally get behind. And as a coordinator, like at a much different level in high school, like that's something you're always looking for is do the athletes, do the players that you're coaching understand what it takes to win. And we've talked a lot about the practice tempo, the practice energy, and how they're kind of cultivating this environment of strain and grind and like mental, kind of mental fatigue. And I think this is going to be an opportunity to see if it's paying off, right? Because like one of the things about this type of practice structure is if you're going at 100 miles an hour at the game, when you have to go 85 or 90, everything's fine. Everything's really smooth. So I'm really curious to see how hard the guys are playing, the level of detail, how crisp it looks. I think that's something that I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised by. Is usually that first preseason game, there's always, even with the ones there's like a holding, there's a formation, and I think because of the standard that's been set here by UB, I think that's something that we shouldn't see. So I'm expecting it to be very, very crisp. I'm expecting those guys to be, if it looks good, I think they'll get out, right? I think that's kind of what we were saying before, right? Like and that's kind of like standard operating procedure for offenses. If you look good, you're out. If it's not looking as crisp, you're going to get some more time on the field. And I think that's kind of what we were saying on whatever day that was, to Wednesday, right? We were saying that on Wednesday or Tuesday, whenever we last talked about it.
Whenever we did. What's a day? Who knows?
Yes, right. So I expect it to be that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, is aggressive, physical football that's very, very detail oriented, and I'm hoping that the team delivers because that's what they've been showing in practice, and I think that's the standard that EB set. So hopefully they can abide by that.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things I'm looking to is how quickly Sam gets the ball out. It feels like he's held it a little bit longer in practice, and it's actually something I've been meaning to ask you, so I will do that now. Have they been working on more down the field stuff, potentially some situations where it's like, Sam, don't hit your first read. We're going to want to work deeper in the progression. It does feel like the ball has not come out quite as quickly the last couple of practices, but I also know that the coaches have said like they're very sharp. They've made some plays, so it's not like they're not producing, but it hasn't been. And again, like we always talk about what's the setup of the drill, and sometimes it's kind of hard to tell in real time.
Sure.
But it like, has the ball been coming out in a manner that it's supposed to, based off the drill from what you can tell these last couple of practices?
I would tend to agree with you slightly that he has been holding the ball a little bit longer. I think a little bit of that is like the situation they did yesterday. They've done like 2 days of like red zone, one low red kind of goal line and one like mid red zone. And those situations tend to be tough, tight window throws. And
those have been interesting. Just to interject real quick, like they'll say like they run 8 plays and like 7 of them will hold the ball because that's what happens in the red zone. And then the other one, it's like one man show, option route. You are throwing the ball as soon as that guy breaks and praying. And you see that route, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then, other than that, it's the hold it and see if a guy can shake loose.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's part of the reason why he's been holding the ball a little longer. Obviously, like I just think the defensive backfield is doing a really good job too. And as much as we want to be like, Sam, like get the ball out, like there's times when you're watching practice and you're like, there is literally nowhere to go with the ball that you feel really good about. Like there's throwing windows and there's lanes, but it's like that's tight. And maybe you don't want the quarterback making those types of decisions, and they're just getting better and better at matching stuff. And I'm talking the defense here. And so the fact that he's holding the ball, I kind of think honestly, like when they go up against Cleveland, like it's going to be easy for Sam, easier in terms of finding throwing windows, finding lanes, because they're going against a group that's super dialed in right now. Like the pass rush is great. We haven't talked about Jamin or Cody Barton for a couple of days, but Jamin has been excellent in coverage the past couple of days and really making a ton of plays and tight coverage and matching the back at a high level. And Cody's, doing a great job. So literally everybody on the defense is playing well. I can't think of one guy where I'm like, man, I wish that dude was playing better here. He's not meeting expectations. So he's going up kind of against the juggernaut in practice, which is something we've talked about. So even though he's been holding the ball a little bit longer, like to your point, I would expect that to be a non-issue in the game because I think you're going to see simpler coverage structures. You're going to see, kind of day one, day two install stuff because that's kind of the standard, for preseason game one. And I think, I think that's what you're going to see is you're going to see a more efficient, more on time Sam Howell. I would assume.
Yeah. I think it's been interesting too because they did give Sam some reps with the twos the other day, and an effort to keep his reps. At least I'm guessing it's to keep his reps high, full complement of them, while also letting Jacoby get a little bit of work with the ones. And I do wonder if Jacoby will see some work with the ones in the preseason to let him operate a little bit behind that one offensive line specifically. But I guess we'll find out on Friday. But the two defensive backs are like Danny Johnson, who's played a lot of NFL football, Quan Martin, Jeremy Reeves, Percy Butler, like Rashad Wildgoose is out there, who's also out there a ton with the ones.
Sure.
Like these DBs are good. And when you get to the threes, like Jake Fromm, I think is having a good camp in part because the guys he's throwing to, like they've got 10 receivers that could make are worthy of making the roster. Yeah. And after you get to like the next, that 3-level, 4-level DB, that's where there's a decent enough drop off that you're like, oh, well, yeah, that's better. But like the two DBs have looked great. The depth back there. And it also, I think, is important to point that out because a lot of these guys like a Quan Martin, like a Rashad Wildgoose, even Danny Johnson and Christian Holmes, like they have rotated their corners enough in camp that some of these guys are getting reps with the ones just to kind of get that practice. And there's not a drop off. And that just shows the togetherness, the communication, the understanding of the scheme, the understanding of the responsibilities, not to mention the individual skill level pretty far down the depth chart of that back seven.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, obviously that first group, like St. Juice, Fuller, Forbes, Cam Curl, Forrest, then obviously there's a dabble of Percy Butler, a dabble of Wild Goose in there. That group is awesome. And then as you kind of, again, like you said, as you move down, twos are a little bit less efficient. Threes are significantly less efficient, right? So it kind of moves in tiers. So, Sam's going to go against the ones the whole time. And that group is really looking very, very sharp. So, I think this is that is going to be a little bit of a relief for Sam, when they get to the game. And I'm kind of excited to see, as I generally think that they've been operating the offense now I'm talking about, operating at such a high practice standard that when they get to the game, it'll feel easy for them. And I think that's kind of one of the objectives of this new practice tempo and structure.
How much do you think he will play? How much do you think he should play?
I don't know. It's first preseason game, so probably something like we've been talking about. If it goes well, probably not a lot. If it goes poorly, more. I don't have any exact number, but every team I've been on, that's kind of what it's been. It's so funny because coaches don't usually tell players, but when they do, it's like, oh man, we got a series, great. And then the series is a 3-and-out for the offense, and the coach is pissed, and the OC is like, we need to go back out there. You go back out there and it's like a 5-play sequence, and it's like that was bad. Let's do another one. And it's like, and then you get your 7 or 8 play drive that ends in a field goal or a touchdown. It's like, okay, that was good. Everyone wants to end on a good note. So if the good note happens right away, great. Everyone's excited. If the good note happens later, it's going to happen later. So, and I think it's the same thing for the defense. Like everyone wants to come out and feel very confident about the product they're putting on the field, offensively and defensively. And if that happens right away, twos, put the helmets on. Let's go out there. Let's play a lot of football. If not, I don't know. I don't think they'll make it to half because I think it's so early in the preseason. Yeah. But I think it could be longer than people think potentially.
I kind of hope so because I didn't get the chance to ask Rivera about this. I don't know if people know this. We may have spent a few minutes on at the start of the podcast. There were other things that were discussed the past couple of days, but I didn't get a chance to ask Rivera how he's going to handle the preseason in total, which is something I was hoping to ask him, but he did kind of answer it in part in other questions. And he said, like, that third preseason game, don't expect to see starters. And I was like, that's interesting because, as we've talked about on the show, you typically don't get a ton of game reps after you joint practice against a team.
Yeah.
I kind of think they are. Like, I feel like they're going to practice against Baltimore, play against Baltimore. And that is, again, different than the way they handle it. And that might be in part, I don't think that business decisions impact football a ton, but like it is the only home preseason game, so maybe they want to get them a little bit more action. Getting used to FedEx Field, whatever the routines and how everything is there. Like I don't know. Obviously, it's the first game of the Josh Harris era, but like that should not impact your preseason. But I have no idea what goes into some of these decisions, and it could be any number of factors. I tend to think it's just like, hey, we're going to handle this like the regular preseason. And I would argue that that's a small mistake and not a catastrophic one, not one that's going to impact the season like in any major way, but just I would say that's not optimized. If it was me making this decision, I would do some in this first game, very little in the second game, a ton, and not a ton, but like play a half in the final game, in part two, because you have 2.5 weeks at that point until your first regular season game, and I don't want it to be almost a full month of no football against another team. But it does sound like they're going to handle this like most teams have handled the preseason since the change from 4 to 3, where they're going to play some this week, more next week, and then very little, and it's kind of on the roster cut guys to make the team in week 3.
Yeah, well, I think it's important for you and I to remember that they probably have 44 roster spots pretty penciled in right now.
Yeah, if not more.
Yeah, I'd say 40. I'd say 44 is a reasonable number with maybe a couple question marks. So let's say a solid 40, 42 for sure making the team. That's like 10 slots you're working on right now, right? So over the next couple of weeks, like if they get those 10 slots really like ironed out and you know exactly what's going on, like I don't want any of those guys playing, right? And everybody else, all these young guys can play and have a great time and get some film in that third game. And I've been a part of teams that have done that like since kind of the new CBA was when I kind of identified that as a thing that was happening more. So as much as we want to see guys and they got to get reps, like they're taking 100 reps in practice on the regular. Like they're getting a ton of reps. They're looking sharp. And so just do what you got to do to get out of this sucker healthy, I think is ultimately what it boils down to, while making sure you're prepared for week 1. Like where is that tipping point? And so I think that makes what Ron said makes sense to me. Even though like kind of from a preparatory standpoint, it kind of would maybe make a little more sense to get maybe some more reps in the third game. But again, maybe the risk isn't worth the reward.
Yeah, I think we get, like, if you're going to play a little bit more in one of the two, right, with the second or the third, I think there's this, like, I don't know if it's like a cousin of recency bias, if you will. I don't know what the exact terminology I'm looking for here is, but like, oh, if it happens if it happens earlier, then it's better. As opposed to like, oh, you're so close to the season now, you made it this far. How could you? And it's like, they're the same reps. What's the difference if they happen in week 2 versus week 3 versus like from a ramp up optimization for the readiness side of the equation versus the risk side of the equation? Like, I actually think the readiness side gets helped. Again, I'm talking about, I don't know, I'm talking about the margins here. It's outside the box. Nobody does it that way. Anytime you do something the way that other people don't, there's inherent risk of you looking like an idiot. It's easy for me to sit here and say this stuff into a microphone. It's not my team. I don't have a new owner that's looking at my every move and examining my job for the future. But it is one of those things that everybody does it the same way, and I'm not actually sure that it's the best way, but I also understand kind of why it happens and don't think ultimately it's that big of a deal.
Sure, I agree.
Last thing for us before we talk to Mr. Chick, or I talk to Mr. Chick. Meetings today. Schedule not great.
Yeah. Not great.
Who's your August hero favorite? There's one of these every year where it's like, who's the guy who wins August, and then you're like, man, I don't know, he makes the team, and then you don't see him again until next August.
Yeah. Gosh, I think there's a couple guys that like are.
Let's shout them out. Let's do it.
Yeah. Let's do offensive guys first. Obviously, there's the 2 offensive linemen we've been talking about. John Smith, the guard, and Mason Brooks are guys that I think are playing good football right now. And obviously, the preseason game is going to be a big deal for those guys. And, if you want to cut another guy in that group that I think for sure going to make the team a little different category is Chris Paul. He's had an excellent, past 5 days of practice.
Yeah.
And I think you look at the receivers, and obviously the top, Jahan's been the best. But then you go down the depth chart, you say Dax is good, Diami's been good. And then those 4 young receivers are all doing a good job. Casimir Allen's been getting some more reps with the twos. You see how explosive he is. You see Tinsley again, you see his polish. The production hasn't matched that yet, in terms of him getting a lot of catches in practice, but he's
made a couple. His catches have come in the end zone, which is not a bad place to have them.
Right. But it's not been like Bryson Tremaine, who catches three balls in a practice, or Sample, who's catching. It's a very specific time for Tinsley, but I do think he's maybe the most polished receiver. So it'll be interesting to see kind of that group of guys in the preseason, who differentiates himself, who's on teams. But I think they're really lucky. I mean, I don't know. All those guys were undrafted free agents, and they're all doing a really good job. The tight ends, obviously, Cole Turner is a special football player. He's going to get a lot of burn. I'm curious to see how much he actually plays. We'll see. Yeah. Curtis Hodges, I want to see play a ton.
Yeah, he has not had a good camp. I actually, when I did my latest roster projection, I do not have him on right now.
So it's interesting because I think it's so funny, man. This will take 5 seconds, but the stuff he's doing in line is good. The stuff he's doing from a route running standpoint is good. It's just, I think what you're referring to is the lack of consistency in finishing, which we've talked about for the last 10 days or so. So does getting him in a preseason environment change that for him, And the other guy who's had a really good last couple of days is Dylan. Is that his name?
Yeah, 46.
Yeah, he's actually done a nice job. And I thought he was no way in hell he's going to make the team. But again, eyes on both those guys for the preseason. That kind of fleshes out the offense, in my opinion. Obviously, Chris Rodriguez. But in terms of guys that I think really could be big burners, those young receivers, those young offensive linemen, and one of those tight ends, I think, is going to step forward. And
so I'll take Mason Brooks is going to mop somebody. I'm a big Mason Brooks fan, as is everyone else at this point. And I'll go with Tinsley. I think he's going to score once or twice, and I think he's got big, we called it the Rashad Ross Award last year, and I think we can continue that because
I like that.
Old Rocket Ross, that guy crushed the preseason. So I'll go Tinsley, and I'll go Mason Brooks.
That's a very solid 2. I think that's a good 2. And then I think you always have to say let me just say you have to say a running back always because they get 1,000 carries at some point in the season. So I'm going to say Chris Rodriguez has a big game.
You know who I think has got big potential to be like Jared Patterson a couple years ago? Gore. I think it's Nick Gore, 38.
Oh, yeah.
New kid they signed who's played for EB in Kansas City. Yeah. You want a guy who is the EB model of every single play. If you're the ball carrier, you sprint to the end zone. It doesn't matter how many guys fake tackle you because it's camp and nobody actually tackles because they're not allowed to and they're not supposed to. He finishes and he's quick. He's fast. I could see him getting a lot of carries and doing well with them.
Yeah, I agree for sure. So defense now?
Let's hit a defense. I don't know I don't have a guy that's in a way it's like the Jeremy Reeves Award. He just kept making the team and all of a sudden he's the first all pro they've had in a decade. But who's the all preseason team nominee?
So just going by position, I think Andre Jones has looked pretty sharp in practice the past couple of days, and he kind of looks like that guy. And he's a guy Marcus White. Remember Marcus White from back in 2011 or 2012? Big athletic defensive end who has 2 sacks and a forced fumble in a preseason game. I could definitely see that happening for him. KJ Henry's doing better, and he's 5th round pick. Maybe he kind of sparks and comes to life. Keep an eye on both those guys. I'm higher on Andre Jones. I actually mentioned him on the show today. And then linebackers, I think Milo would be a guy. Milo, Kalik, but Kalik's kind of already established.
Yeah, you can't count Kalik. He's going to make the team and might start.
Yeah. And then on the back end, golly, I feel like there's a young safety that's been really doing a great job, and I just cannot remember. Oh, number 41 from Illinois.
DJ Sturgis.
Kendall Smith. Isn't that the guy from Illinois? Is that his name?
41. Kendall Smith is 40.
40, yeah. So 40,
Yeah.
and he has flashed a little bit around the ball, but he was also very productive in college. So I'm kind of hoping that he's a gamer a little bit and comes up with like a turnover or, a big hit or something. And those are guys from the back end that I'm kind of like, that's one guy. Just because of his college production, I'm like, just circle that guy and see what happens.
Apologies to Derek Gore, not Nick Gore. Old 38, running fast, last name only, Gore, first name Derek. Apologies there. I got two guys for you. I shouted out Terrell Burgess the other day. I feel like he's had a solid, made some plays in camp. So we'll see what he does. But a guy that I keep just like, who's that big fella rumbling down the field, making stuff happen? Abdullah Anderson, big 92.
Dude, he has been flashing a little bit, and he's a
You're
guy.
You're like, wait, who's that guy?
He's played football. He was on an active roster last year. He was on Atlanta's roster, wasn't he?
I don't know about that. He's he's got 3 years of experience. He's 27, so it's not like he's a super young guy. But I could see him making a couple of plays. I mean, Gore's 28. It's not necessarily a young guy who's going to be like a future player. It's just like who's going to be good in the preseason, Yeah,
that's a
good. And I'll go Abdullah Anderson, big old 92.
But he is a guy that he flashes in one-on-ones, and you can tell he's a guy that it was like me actually. He's got a lot of experience that's going to be playing with guys who are not as good later in the game and could have a lot of explosive plays going against a less experienced offensive line. But I will say, this is something I wanted to point out before we end. Cleveland Browns offensive line, very deep and very good. So
they got some guys, and they're Callahan coached, aren't they?
Yeah, they are Callahan coached. So a lot of chip help, a lot of play action, a lot of heavy jump sets, all that kind of stuff. So it'll be a good test, I think, for the ones, the twos, and the threes. And William, our producer, just said 16 games started. So I don't know if he qualifies for what this award.
Yeah, right? Maybe not. But he's definitely on the line of making the team. So I think in that way he counts.
Yeah, but it's like he's been in the league.
Sure.
That's my thought on that. So maybe pick another one.
I don't have another one. That was my bad. He's a guy. He qualifies because I didn't know his name before camp started, and now I do. That's correct. My qualification.
He does flash. What's his name? There's another guy we should shout out. 79.
Benning Potoye.
Yeah. He was on the team last year. He played some games, but he is a guy that I think on the defensive line, in addition to those two edge rushers, that could make some waves because of his play style. Very aggressive hands. Good athlete for being a bigger guy. So he's a guy, I'd circle him too. If you're looking for a guy maybe with a little bit less experience than Anderson. So
there you go. All right. Let's talk. All right. That from Take Command. If you want to hear that Chick Hernandez interview, you can go find Take Command on your favorite podcast platform. But we're going to pick up here on the radio show with the August Heroes conversation. We're looking for a guy who is going to shine in the preseason regardless of what he does in the regular season. That's the criteria we're using, 301-230-0980. I know so many of you have been to training camp, more of you than in any year previously, going back to basically 2012, have been to training camp. You've obviously been listening to all the shows, listening to all your favorite podcasts. Who's your guy for the August portion of the season? I don't care what happens from September on. August hero. The Rashad Ross Award, if you will. 301-230-0980. Your call's next.
Hoffman covers every angle of the command.
By the way, did you ever find your headphones?
Yes, I did find them actually.
Who do you think hid them? Who do we need to fight?
What were you saying?
I said now that you've got your headphones on. Who do we need to fight? Who do we think hid them? Where were they?
So Jeff Walker definitely came into the studio and took my headphones.
If you had given me one guess, 100% Jeff Walker.
Yep.
100%. All right, Jeff Walker. You come in, sometimes you just barge in, you're like, hey, I'm here. And I'm like, cool, like, what are you doing here? Which is fine. Jeff's a delight. But can you please leave my guy's headphones alone? He's a professional radio producer. He's got things to do.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you.
You're welcome.
favorite story is, I think we were playing Cincinnati. Was it Cincinnati?
That's not what depends on the story, but maybe we were playing Cincinnati.
So Logan catches this touchdown.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was Cincinnati. Yep.
It was Cincinnati. So we put in this play, and it was like, I think we called it Hoss Juke or something like that. I can't remember what we called it in that offense, but Logan's on a seam, right? So he's our vertical threat, taking the top off the defense.
Digging out, guys.
We're talking in the week. I don't think we ever said it in the install with those guys, but they're like, listen, Logan's not even in the progression. He's taking the top off this thing. We're trying to work this little option route down. And they bust this coverage. And I mean, he is screaming wide open.
I wasn't even supposed to be on the play. They were supposed to sub somebody else in because I thought I was too slow to run this route. Just for the context here for everybody.
So he's screaming wide open. And I'm like, Matt, throw it at his back shoulder. You might hit him in stride. If you try and back shoulder him. Threw it right at him. He catches it. It was an awesome touchdown. Just the celebration afterwards was so much fun. For me, it was always fun celebrating the touchdowns with the guys that didn't score them all the time. You know, like
take that, Julio Jones.
Yeah, and I'm not, I'm saying that, but like your role for us was you did the dirty work, and when you see guys that do the dirty work get rewarded for it, that was really cool. Something I'll never forget. The caveman. Yeah. And the caveman was in there in the end zone celebrating. It was awesome.
Oh, man. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. If only the people at home could hear what I got to hear during that break, which was Anthony singing this song at the top of his lungs through the glass. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
You know you like that song. You like that. You like that. Maybe not me singing, but at least my guys One Direction. Yes, sir.
Your guys?
Yes, sir.
I will say, as someone who watches The Voice, Niall Horan was fantastic on that show.
Yes.
His solo stuff, I mean, like, undeniably a bop.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a reason they were very successful. They know how to write a pop song and perform it, those five striking young fellows from the UK. But a lot of them have gone on to do solo stuff that's pretty good, too. Niall's stuff is really good.
Yep.
Got range on music.
A little bit.
You got some range, too.
A tad, you know.
I mean, people probably wouldn't have expected when we did our concert draft last week. Earlier this week? Last week? Last week. That our number one pick, we were fighting over Adele.
Yep. I think me going to Georgetown Prep definitely expanded that horizon.
I think that's probably correct. I'm going to go as far as to guess that you also may have expanded the horizons of some other folks at Georgetown Prep.
Yes. Yes.
Have you heard of? That's always a fun game.
Yes.
Two Americas becoming one, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We have great musical range. We also stream live on the free Odyssey app, where you can find a wide range of phenomenal music stations like WPGC, like 94.7 The Drive, like El Sol, if you want Spanish language music. We got a lot of great stuff just here in D.C., but nationwide. Plenty of great stations as well. You can listen to them all free on that free Odyssey app. What you can't do with all those, though, is stream live on YouTube. You can watch this show on YouTube at the Team 980. The show that would little hint, peek, sneak peek. Going to be getting a little refresh on Monday. New graphics package. We're working on it. It's about time. Just some stuff to look forward to, you know? Anyway, the point is, it's the preseason. And we would like to hear your August Hero predictions at 301-230-0980. Anthony, I like to call this the Rashad Ross Award. That is dating myself because for the years that I was on the beat, reserve practice squad receiver Rashad Ross would emerge every single preseason into the end zone without fail. Multiple touchdowns every preseason, had some kick return stuff, and eventually he did make the team even. I think multiple years he made the team and then was inactive on every game day and basically never got in the game. And there was, me included, like, yo, this guy clearly stinks in practice because he cannot get on the field, but, like, he's a gamer. Get him out there. Had great speed, but just one of those guys that was super talented and could make plays in the preseason, but you couldn't trust him. Like, that was always the thing with the coaches. And not like bad dude couldn't trust him. Like, we'll blow an assignment, we'll run the wrong route. You run the wrong route on the wrong play. The ball goes your way. You're supposed to run a comeback. You run a go. Now you throw the ball straight to the DB. It's a pick six, and that costs you the game. Like, that's why coaches don't like players they can't trust to execute. So we call it. But regardless of that, he was awesome every preseason. So who are your candidates for the Rashad Ross Award?
So I have a couple.
Okay.
And quick question.
Okay.
So some of the guys on my list, I'm expecting them to splash during the preseason, but also play a little bit during the regular season. Does that count?
Yeah, I'll allow it. In some ways, that could be the Logan Paulson Award. Because Logan crushed the preseason.
Yep.
Because he was lower on the depth chart, but good enough to be in the league. Like, Logan, in some ways, this is, like, Logan's a little better than this. And we've talked about this. This is not me talking behind Logan's back. Logan, in some ways, was a quadruple A player. Right? You know that phrase?
No.
Okay, so, like, obviously Major League Baseball, there's the majors.
Yep.
Or in baseball, there's the majors, and then the highest level of the minors is AAA.
Yep.
And there's some players that are too good for AAA, but not good enough for the majors. And they're just, every time they get called up, they can't cut it.
Yeah.
And they get knocked back down, and they crush AAA. And they wind up having a long AAA career, and that's fine. And they get called up to the majors every now and again, and it just never works for them at that level. My good friend from childhood, Michael Roth, was like this. Michael's one of the best pitchers in the history of the College World Series. He played very well in the minors for almost a decade, but every time he got up, like, he'd have the occasion, he was a pitcher, occasionally have a good start or an effective relief appearance, but he could not string together a major league career. He was a 4A player. Logan was slightly better than that. Logan was a backup NFL player. But he had a very specific role. But if you let him expand that role in the preseason against guys who were not actual NFL players, like the fourth preseason game back in the day, Logan murdered them. Logan was a fourth preseason game monster. So we're not necessarily looking for a Logan Paulson Award, but we'll take it.
All right. So I'll start off with my Logan Paulson Award winners.
Okay.
My first is Quan Martin. I don't think we're going to see him that much.
Quan Martin is not eligible for this. He's a second-round pick.
He is, but how much do you think we're going to see of him during the regular season?
Fair amount.
But also, okay.
Yeah, no, I think he will rotate in at safety, play.
But I think it's going to be
35-40% of the snaps.
I think it's going to be tough because you also got Percy Butler in front of him, and then you also got, Derek Forrest and Cam Curl. I think it's just a crowded DB room where I don't necessarily see him getting too much time during the regular season. But during the preseason, I think you plug him everywhere. You put him in the post. You put him in the slot. You put him in the box. See where he can, play best. So that's why I was thinking I think we're going to see a lot of Quan just because they want to be able to see, where he best fits.
Okay. We're going to have to invent a new award. I don't think that really hits the
That's
spirit.
not fair. Then, all right.
It's kind of like he's the Quan Martin Award. The Quan Martin Award goes to Quan Martin. He's the experimental player that we don't know what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. I just think he's going to play – I think he's going to play 35, 40% of the snaps in the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to be out there mostly in the nickel. But I think that I think they're going to play 4 safeties at times because they can play Cam and Quan both as quasi linebackers. And if you get teams that spread it out or put multiple tight ends on the field where it's not hey, okay, Quan or Cam taking on a tight end in the run game is not the worst thing. If they got to take on O lineman, that's a different story. But if you have a team that plays a lot of 2 tight ends, I could see them playing 4 safeties and having those guys kind of rotate in and out of the box. In some games, he might play a ton. I also think he might wind up being your best nickel option, although Rashad Wildgoose is having a hell of a camp.
Yep.
So I don't think that – I don't know. I see what you're saying.
Yep.
But it's also I guess these by nature are mostly young guys, but I feel like if you're a second-round pick, you come with expectations. And these are kind of guys that I think are a little more off the radar that we're looking for the Rashad Ross Award or even the Logan Paulson Award.
Okay. Well, you already have one of my Rashad Ross winners, Mason Brooks. I think people are going to be in awe with him, especially if you haven't seen him just yet. Ron, did say, he has room for growth and things of that nature. But what I've seen from him early in camp against the 2s, against the 3s, has been pretty, impressive. So I'm looking to see how he performs in the preseason. And my other guy would be Marcus Kemp. He's not necessarily under the radar because I think he is sort of kind of established as a special teamer. But offensively, I think he's good. He's a big target. He's been able to get open during camp, and he's made some pretty tough catches. So I will also just mention him. I don't think he's going to make the team, though.
Yeah, I don't either. But interesting. He's also a little bit, as you said, he's been in the league. Another name we thought of, another guy that we thought of as we were trying to think of the defensive guys is the Jeremy Reeves Award because Reeves was another guy, almost the more Logan Paulson-y, that on defense just for years he was really, really good in the 4th preseason game. And you're that dude's better. And it was actually DeShazer before him. And then Reeves stepped in every single way for DeShazer. And then Reeves messed around and made an all-pro last year as a special teams guy. So, okay, you didn't hit any of mine. Obviously, if you were listening earlier in the hour, you heard some of mine in the podcast replay. But I got mine. I'll react to yours. Brooks is an interesting one to throw around. He might fit the mold better than, I think, almost anyone. So we will discuss next and take yours on the phones. 301-230-0980. You can leave a comment in the YouTube stream at the Team 980. And, of course, you can also tweet us at Craig Hoffman. That's all next after a look at what's trending on the Team 980 in the free Odyssey app.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/@theteam980, where, if you're watching, you see Linnell Willingham bopping in the background. I feel like, Linnell, this is actually like your segment in so many ways. Like a segment about the deep knowledge of the roster, the underbelly of the Commanders roster, who could shine, who should we have irrational expectations for? Yeah, I'm going to need to get you on a microphone in just a second. So I promised mine first, though. So we're doing our August heroes. Who is the guy who's going to win the Rashad Ross Award as the player who shines in the preseason, but is not going to really have an impact in the regular season? I've got a couple guys. Mitchell Tinsley at wide receiver has been fantastic during camp. He's made a ton of plays. I think this receiver room is just too deep. Like we talked about it earlier in the week when we did a roster projection on Monday, which if you missed is in the podcast feed. It's on the YouTubes, etc. Byron Pringle, I think, is a lock to make this roster the way he's played in camp so far. You'd have to have a really, really bad couple weeks here and have someone else, Tinsley or otherwise, be awesome. But I think Tinsley has had a knack for finding the end zone in camp. There's been some other guys that have made more catches, but he's been in the end zone a lot. That's a prime Rashad Ross Award nominee. So he's one guy for me. And then defensively, this is probably my favorite one. Is Abdullah, big number 92. He has been making a bunch of plays. He has splash plays, which is fun for an interior defensive lineman because it's like one thing if you're beating guys and getting sacks, and he's made a couple of those, but he also has been chasing guys down on the sideline. And you're like, who's that big fellow? What is he doing over there? And he's been very fun to watch. So there's my offense and my defense. Go to the phones in a second, 301-230-0980. We don't have a camera on Linnell, but we do have a microphone in front of his face. Linnell, who is your Rashad Ross Award nominee?
Oh, I thought I was going to get to listen to Anthony first. You guys stole the good ones. Well, you had a sneaky one with Amir Abdullah.
Yeah.
Abdullah Anderson, excuse me.
Yeah. Anthony went in the last segment.
Okay. Who did you use? Who did you take? You didn't tell me who you took.
I had Mason Brooks.
Mason Brooks? You can't just an offensive lineman to win the Rashad Ross Award.
Look, he goes out there and pancake blocks a couple of guys, which is possible. He could mop a couple dudes. And honestly, like in Take Command, where we did a couple more of these, he was on my list.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. I'm going to go with a running back.
Always a great pick.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jonathan Williams. I think he's going to get a lot of burn. I think there's some legit threat to him making the roster with the Kansas City back, Gore, that they signed. I think he's got
That's my other nominee.
I think he's got a legitimate shot to, maybe make things challenging for Jonathan Williams. On defense, it's so hard because I feel like there are so many worthy candidates. I'm going to go with a pass rusher because I think that's the type of position that can have a splash and an impact right away.
For sure.
I think this Andre Jones kid, man, he's got a lethal spin move. I want to see if he does it against real tackles. Well, I guess practice is real tackles, but I want to see him do it in the game, man. I think he's going to have a legit shot to make the 53 because he's got some special teams pop. Former linebacker in college, he can run and get up and down the field on teams. So, yeah, that's my two guys.
Yeah, I think he's got a chance to make the team. If you're just going purely off of what they've done in camp, you could make a real argument he's been better than KJ Henry. It's very, very close. And Henry's the higher draft pick. You'd imagine they probably just go with Henry.
Yeah.
But I think those are two good picks. Derek Gore is my other one. Running backs are great. We could have easily called this the Jared Patterson Award instead of the Rashad Ross Award. Right. Patterson is still eligible. Rashad Ross won the Rashad Ross Award multiple years in a row. That's why the award is, at least on this show, is named after him. But I think watching Derek Gore in practice, like, he's got some pop. Now, he hasn't stuck in the league, and he's like 28 years old. But he's the kind of guy that with good athleticism, and by the way, because he's 28 years old and has been in the league a little bit, he's got a little bit of know-how, which is a way to – like, in some ways, it's more of a Logan Paulson Award nominee. A guy, did you miss this in the last segment? A guy who's actually, like, too good to be playing with the string players he's playing with in the preseason, but he's got, like, a unique role on the team, so that's just where he is on the depth chart. So Logan used to destroy people in the fourth preseason game because he shouldn't have really been out there, but someone had to play. In some ways, Derek Gore kind of hits that. All right, let's take some calls. 301-230-0980. 0980. Let's go to Derek, who's also got a running back. Derek, who you got for the Rashad Ross, Jared Patterson, Logan Paulson awards?
Thanks for taking my call. I was actually going to go with Chris Rodriguez, but I don't know if that counts because he's, at least a 6th-round draft pick. And,
yeah, he's a later round guy, and if he's like if he goes out and rushes for 120 yards, like I think he's allowed to win it. But as a draft pick in his rookie year, I would probably count him as ineligible.
So can I ask for one thing?
Sure.
The other thing is I would love to see what we end up with as somebody who's like a returner type. I know the Allen kid or whatever out of the West Coast there was a big guy. So
yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one, Derek. Thanks for the call. Kazmir Allen is the name that you're looking for out of UCLA. Oops, hung up on Derek. Sorry, Derek. Kazmir Allen, he's super quick. He got a lot of hype in OTAs and didn't really perform great in OTAs. He's had a solid camp. Like all the wide receivers, they're like 10 deep at receiver. Jalen Samples had a good camp. Bryson Tremaine's had a good camp. Like there's just a ton of dudes that have played well. I wonder if Pringle's going to wind up being the returner in the regular season. But yeah, Kazmir Allen definitely, like if he's going to pop and make the team, I think it's got as good of a chance of happening as a punt returner as it does, making a play out of the slot with, on a ball from Jake Fromm somewhere in the third quarter on Friday, which is somehow already tomorrow.
I think Jake Fromm's going to be good. I feel like he's got the weapons, like you said. They're so deep in that room.
Yeah, that's actually – we were talking about that on the pod yesterday because, like, the second-string corners have been really good.
Yeah.
The third-stringers is where you start to see a little bit of a drop-off, and you don't really see that big of a drop-off between some of the 2 wide receivers and the 3 and even the 4 wide receivers. Like, they crush their scouting at the wide receiver position. Yeah. So depending on how deep Cleveland's, bad defensive backs are, does Bryson Tremaine go out and, like, moss somebody? Like, it's on the table.
Be great to see.
It would be. Or we think they're good and they're actually not, and Jake Fromm's going to throw 17 picks.
Yeah, that'd
be bad. He's gonna play a lot. A lot of Jake Fromm time. A lot of Jake Fromm time tomorrow. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to preview it all the way till 7:30. Oh, yeah, extra half hour for the preseason. Let's get some football because I got nothing better to do at 7 o'clock on a Friday. I was going to watch the game anyway. Who am I kidding? I got nothing better to do but preview it. So let's do it tomorrow. Extra half hour on the Hoffman Show. Linnell, thanks for popping by. What do you got tonight?
I'm on pinch hit duty in case the Nationals and the Phillies decide they don't want to play baseball tonight. It will be your boy. But it looks like they're going to play baseball tonight. But I'm glad I got to do this with you.
Yeah, I'm glad we got some use out of you.
Man.
You drove all the way down here, or Metro, or however the hell you got here.
Yeah.
That's a long ride for you to not do a show.
Well, that's what happens when you're
dedicated to the craft?
Yes.
That's exactly what you were going to say.
Yes.
You hear that? You hear that? Hear that, bosses? This is a man who's dedicated to the craft and has no complaints. Turn his mic off before he complains. Turn his mic off. Turn his mic off before he complains. Okay. When we get back, Scott Allen joins us for, speaking of the Nats and the Phillies, Nats got no hit last night. First time it's ever happened as the Nationals. Not the first time a Washington baseball team has been no hit, though, and you've got to hear the story of the first time. That's next here on the Team 980. Hey, I'm Craig Hoffman.
And I'm Logan Paulson.
Here's what we need to do right now. I'm tired of hearing about this basketball game. We're scheduling this game.
He challenged me.
You challenged me. Don't say I challenged you.
Either way.
I came.
No. Don't either way this.
I mean,
because you know what you sound like? You sound like you're trying to weasel out of this.
Yeah, he is, Craig. He knows
there's no
what he's
weaseling
doing.
out of the actual playing of the game. I'm not worried about that.
11 a.m. Saturday, right?
All right, 11 a.m. on
11
Saturday.
a.m. Saturday.
God.
There's 2. And 1.
Little recap?
It was somehow worse for Linnell than I thought it was going to be.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/@theteam980. And it's our pleasure to welcome back to the show Scott Allen from the Washington Post. Scott, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Craig. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I am good. Always good to chat. And I especially love having you on because typically it's sparked by something wacky, which is my favorite. Like we can do X's and O's and chalk talk or, important things all day, but the wacky is where we thrive. And the Nats, they did this wacky thing last night called getting no hit. But that itself is not what we're here to talk about. You started doing some research on the history of Washington baseball teams getting no hit. And can you tell the people, of course, for the full history, WashingtonPost.com/sports, at least click on it, even if you don't read it. Give Scott the click because you heard it on the radio. But can you tell the people what you found?
Yeah, and this truly is wacky. So, last night after it happened, a lot of people were pointing out that this ended the longest active streak of a franchise not being no-hit. The Nationals had never been no-hit since moving to D.C. in 2005. And then if you include the Expos, you'd have to go all the way back to 1999 when David Cohn threw his perfect game to find the last time the franchise was no-hit. So I was poking around, knowing that, the Senators, the two versions of the Senators were here and, from in 1900s up to, 72. I'm wondering, all right, how many times has a Washington Major League team been no-hit? And there's this website, nohitters.com, which compiles a wonderful list of the amount of no-hitters for every team and the amount of no-hitters that a team has been no-hit. And I come across the Senators Minnesota Twins page, and there's this note from 1917. The first time the original Washington Senators were no-hit was by the Boston Red Sox. And Babe Ruth, a guy named Babe Ruth, and Ernie Shore are listed as the pitchers. It turns out this was the first combined no-hitter in Major League history. And while Babe Ruth started the game, he did not record a single out. He walked to the first batter of the game, was evidently upset with the home plate umpire for missing a couple of calls during that walk, and proceeds to punch said home plate umpire, getting ejected and paving the way for his teammate Ernie Shore to retire the next 27 Senators batters, which is just absurd, wacky.
That is insane. That is so the guy who came was Ernie Shore. Is that, do I have the name right here?
Ernie Shore.
So he comes in and throws a perfect game. It's just that there was a dude on first when he started.
Exactly. So after Shore comes in, so it turns out the Red Sox catcher was ejected along with Ruth because he failed to protect the home plate umpire from from Ruth's punch.
Of course.
So the Senators,
standard umpiring there. You got to throw that guy out.
Exactly. It was a worthy suspension or a worthy ejection. So the Senators, rather wisely, I would say, their leadoff man Ray Morgan, who had been walked by Babe Ruth, they decided to test this backup catcher who was just inserted into the game. So Ray Morgan takes off for second, gets thrown out trying to steal. There's the first out, and that base runner was attributed to Ruth. And then Ernie Shore, Ruth's replacement, retires the next 26 batters in order. Nobody reaches base. And it's crazy. There was, in doing this, I went down a rabbit hole with this.
Of course. How could you not? I have so many questions, and I'm curious how many of them you answered.
Right. So 12 years after the fact, the Society of American Baseball Research has an excellent article that I linked to on this game. But they mentioned that 12 years after the fact, Ernie Shore's game kind of officially enters the record books as a perfect game because he retired 27 batters. One of them was on that caught stealing without allowing anyone to reach base. Well, then fast forward to 1991, and baseball's Committee for Statistical Accuracy, I had no idea this thing existed, which was headed by the commissioner at the time, Fay Vincent. They basically established the first definition of what a perfect game is. And by that definition, which is now available on MLB's site, and it says that nobody can reach base at any point in the game, they essentially downgraded what had been considered a perfect game by Ernie Shore to a combined no-hitter, the first combined no-hitter in baseball history. So a bit of a blow to Ernie Shore's legacy, I guess, but still a very cool combined no-hitter with the great Babe Ruth.
Wow, that is incredible. And we learned all of this because the Nationals got no hit by a guy last night who shares the same name as a guy that I played basketball with in the third grade. I do not think it's the same Michael Lorenzen, but I did play. He was very good. Actually, I was older than that. It was middle school. Nobody cares. But I'm pretty sure it's not the same Michael Lorenzen. Anyway.
This Michael, you mentioned Michael Lorenzen. I want to throw this out too because this factoid, this is wacky too. And
probably better than mine, so go ahead.
Well, this got buried because of the Ruth punch of the umpire thing, which is ridiculous. So Michael Lorenzen went to Fullerton Union High School in California.
Okay, definitely not the same guy that I went to middle school.
same high school that Walter Johnson, the Senators legend, went to.
Mm-hmm.
So Walter Johnson, he threw a no-hitter in his career. Somebody on Twitter pointed out after Lorenz's no-hitter that there have been 4 pitchers, according to BaseballReference.com's database, who went to Fullerton Union High School, who then appeared in the major leagues. 4. All 4 of them now have thrown at least one no-hitter.
What?
Is that ridiculous?
That's insane. Who are the other 2?
Lorenzen, Walter Johnson, a Royals pitcher named Steve Busby, who threw 2 no-hitters, actually.
Wait,
and then
okay, so hold on. Pause before you get to the 4th one. Busby has been doing Texas Rangers games on TV forever and is phenomenal. So I knew Buzz down in Texas a little bit.
Okay, well, pride of Fullerton Union High School, 2 no-hitters to his name.
Okay.
And then the 4th was an Oakland A's pitcher named Mike Warren, who had, I think, 2 or 3 very good years before undergoing Tommy John surgery and really never making it back.
Wow.
And it gets weirder, and I may have something on this next week, but yet another Twitter researcher pointed out that BaseballReference.com's database may not be complete. And, in fact, there may be a 5th pitcher from Fullerton Union High, a former Washington Senator named Bob Ross, who pitched a couple years in the 50s, and he did not throw a no-hitter, which kind of hurts
just ruins everything, basically.
It ruins everything. People are running with this on MLB Network, I think, had this graphic up on their site. So that would ruin the wackiness of the stat a little bit, but still 4 out of 5 guys to go to the same high school and the only 5 to make the major leagues, 4 of them throw a no-hitter is insane.
That's wild. Scott Allen's with us from the Washington Post. So going back to some of the rabbit holes that you went down in researching the Babe Ruth thing, in case you're just joining us and wondering, what in the hell are you guys talking about? Nationals get a no-hit last night. Scott wrote about all of the times that the Nationals have been, or I guess Washington baseball teams, I should say, have been no-hit, because the first time that the Nationals got no-hit was last night. And in doing so, found an incredible game that happened, the first combined no-hitter in Major League history, where Babe Ruth walked one batter, tried to punch the umpire, actually did successfully punch the umpire, got thrown out of the game, and then another guy came in and finished it. So is there any other, or are there any other games in Major League history that you are aware of where there were 27 batters faced, but not a perfect game? Whether it's a double play or anything like that. Was that one of the rabbit holes you went down?
That wasn't. It's a great question, and I don't have an answer for you. I did come across, in researching some of the other, so the Washington has never had a perfect game thrown against them at any point in Washington baseball history.
Thanks to the statistical change in 1991. Thank you, Faye Vincent.
Exactly. Thanks to that, and thanks to actually the second no-hitter thrown against Washington, 1947, by the Philadelphia Athletics' Bill McCann, a legend, I'm sure.
If in his own mind, nowhere else.
25-year-old rookie out of Duke. He threw a no-hitter, and it would have been a perfect game if not for the only batter who reached base in that game did so on an error by the A's first baseman. So that's how close he became to throwing what would have been the first no-hitter, throwing the first perfect game since the Ernie Shore perfect game of 1917 that was then changed to a no-hitter in 1991.
Right, which is just so easy to describe to people in normal day-to-day conversation. Any other fun tidbits, any other hooks, any other teases to this story before we talk about other things?
One thing that didn't make the piece.
Those are actually more honestly my favorite.
Yeah. Virgil Trucks, who has a great name, Virgil Fire Trucks of the Detroit Tigers. He threw a no-hitter against the Nats, or the Senators rather, in 1952. And I found one line in the Washington Post account of the game and saw it nowhere else. So maybe the Nats or the Senators beat writer was just really plugged in with Detroit Tigers baseball. He reported that Trucks was complaining about the tightness of his shoes before the game, and had switched cleats with a teammate named Art Houdeman. And Houdeman, like 13 days earlier or something, had taken a no-hitter into the ninth inning and had it broken up with 2 outs in the ninth. So Virgil Trucks was able to finish the job in his subsequent start wearing this guy's pair of shoes because his own were too tight for some reason.
Those shoes almost had 2 no-hitters. That's, I mean...
Did you see the shoes speaking of shoes, and then we can move on, did you see the shoes that Lorenzen had last night?
They were Vans, right?
Yeah, the white Vans spikes. Pretty sweet.
I think Spike Lee in the 80s working with Michael Jordan. Wrong shoes, bro. You gotta get on the baseball cleats that have the magic no-hitters in them. That's the ad campaign we need. Come on, Spike.
Yeah. Exactly. That's that Fullerton, California pride.
All right. Scott Allen's with us, of course, DC Sports Bog for the Washington Post, WashingtonPost.com/sports. So, Scott, you cover as much as anyone does for the Post, kind of sports media stories. And to me, the Eric-Bieniemy, Ron Rivera story this week is as much a media fan story as it is an actual football story. That's where I come down on it, that what Ron Rivera ultimately described, although clumsily, was a good process where like players had, human level complaints. They went to a boss. The boss said, work it out amongst yourselves. And they did. And like, that's good. But people freaked out because they like drama. And I'm curious for someone who covers this, like, you said yup. So I'm going to say, I hope that means you agree with me at least on some level. But to me, it's like that's a reflection on us more than it is and kind of the state of media, and that includes social media and thus people who are actually not like reporters, opinionists, whatever. But that's a reflection of us more than it is anything that Ron or Eric or any of the players did. I'm curious how you see this story from where you sit as someone who you obviously cover sports as a sports reporter, but also kind of cover sports media and look at it through both lenses.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. I think there just has to be an awareness on the part of Ron Rivera and any coach this time of year that, the media, the fans are going to latch on to anything that's said because they're, with the exception of the Hall of Fame game, there haven't been games played yet. And I think that the main reaction to come out of that was not everything, needs to be said. I think Ron Rivera throughout his time here, doesn't generally make news in his news conferences, which is I think a positive attribute. It's not great for reporters necessarily, but with the exception of him, and he addressed this, after the fact last year, what came to mind to me was the infamous press conference about when he talked about Carson Wentz and his, how he compared relative to the other quarterbacks in the NFC East last year. That wound up being a bit of a distraction. And this, I think, was kind of on the same level. I mean, he read the prepared statement the following day saying he kind of put his foot in his mouth. But, it could have just been avoided completely where you don't have to be so open and honest, even though I think as reporters I will
never advocate for that.
I know. No, I mean,
but I get it. I'm not naive. I'm like, why when people are because it's not just like, it's one thing when you are honest and forthcoming and you say something incredibly stupid, but it's another when you're just insightful and people go, oh, that's interesting. Like that was a growth opportunity or a proof of growth within an organization, or yes, something bad did happen, but like, okay, now that the wound is healed, we can tell you about it. Like, or we let you into the process. I hate when people are insightful and then we jump on them because that incentivizes them to not be insightful. And I don't want to live in a world where we incentivize people not to be insightful.
Yep. Nope, that's 100% right. And I think a big issue and what we saw happen with Rivera's comments was, if he delivers those just to the beat reporters here in DC who are there every single day, can follow up, know the context, have seen Eric-Bieniemy in action, can talk to players about what they think, it doesn't probably wind up on the ESPN bottom line ticker. our ticker, this little snippet, and get blown out of proportion to some extent on the national shows. But that's just the reality of what it is. So you're in a tough spot, if you're Ron Rivera. You got to have this awareness that whatever you say could wind up as a little blip on the ticker, and you got to live with that if it happens, because I think here, people who are out at training camp and probably didn't view this as a huge deal as it became. But given the what became of those comments in the hours after he made them, he obviously felt the need to address it the following day, which continues to fuel the story. But I agree with you. It is. I don't want to disincentivize any of the people we cover from being open and honest and saying interesting things from time to time. The reality is this sort of thing will happen, though, if you do it in a certain way.
No doubt. All right, Scott Allen with us for another minute or two here on the Hoffman Show. Last thing, speaking of local sports media stories that have blown up nationally, Kevin Brown. Kevin Brown's a really good friend of mine. We've known each other since we were at Syracuse together. And it has been wild for me to watch this story, and I can only imagine. Like, I've talked to Kevin very, very, very briefly, but I think he's laying rather low during this, in part because I imagine his phone is a dumpster fire of people sending him well wishes, which is, I guess it's not really a dumpster fire, but whatever that is. It's a nonstop of people sending him well wishes, which is good. But I'm curious, like, he's supposed to be back on the broadcast tomorrow. This thing is blown up in a way that I could never have imagined. Like, if one, do you think the Orioles will ever say anything about this? Two, do you think Major League Baseball will ever say anything about this? And three, like, does he just say, "Hey, welcome back to the game tomorrow," or does this kind of have to be addressed as they're chanting "Free Kevin Brown" at Camden Yards the other night?
It is one of the wildest stories I can remember covering in a long time, because in writing it, I'm thinking about my readers who, come across the reason that he was reportedly taken off the air, and it just makes absolutely no sense. It's like people who watched the clip of him reading off the Orioles record in Tampa Bay the past 3 years, reading the story. They're like, okay, where did you leave out the part where he, dropped some slur or something? It's insane. I am super curious. It's, they've got a late game tomorrow. They're in Seattle. I will be watching to see, one, is he in the booth? And two, does he say anything? Or does anybody in that Masson broadcast booth say anything? Because throughout this whole story, ever since it broke from awful announcing on Monday, the reason that he was reported just for reciting facts that were in the team's game notes, that were prepared in the graphic on Masson, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there has to be more to this story. There has to be more to the story. But with the days going on and the Orioles not saying anything about it, if there was more to the story, you would think the Orioles would have commented and said, hey, something to the effect of, there's more to the story. Because they look incredibly foolish. They've been ridiculed, rightfully so, by Kevin's colleagues, and the chant that you mentioned of free Kevin Brown in the ballpark, that's kind of become more of the focus than the team's play. So at this point, I don't think there is more to the story. I believe it was management having incredibly thin skin. And given that they haven't said anything to this point, I don't think they will come Friday. I haven't received any indication that Major League Baseball is going to step in and say anything. But I don't know if you're Kevin Brown, how you can't say something when you come back. This clearly wasn't a planned absence. It'll be super weird if he says nothing and continues like nothing happened.
Yeah, I don't know. But I also imagine if you got essentially suspended because your management has thin skin, like, what do you say? You just thanks. I'm glad to be back. Feeling fresh. I don't know. Kevin's also one of the funniest people I know, so I can imagine some sly something that is slipped in. That if you know, you know, wink and a nod. But who knows? I guess we'll find out tomorrow night when the broadcast opens from Seattle.
Yeah, he shouldn't. I guess he shouldn't talk about the Orioles' record in games since it was reported that he was suspended for reciting facts about the Orioles' record in games the previous 3 years.
Welcome into Orioles baseball on Masson. I'm Kevin Brown. There will be a game tonight. Here's the starting pitcher.
Exactly.
And then shut up and let
game notes.
Yeah.
Don't refer to them going forward.
No,
just an absurd story.
Bad. I mean, that was honestly also one of the other things I was thinking, Scott. Like, if he was watching, especially if he was watching the TBS telecast, because they turned down the chant on the Masson broadcast.
Yeah.
Like, Kevin's the kind of guy that's going to be prepared. Like, I doubt he was not watching the games while he was out, knowing that he was coming back. And I just can't imagine being like, wait, what are they saying? Oh, that's me. Yeah. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Like, what a weird night that must have been for him, either when people started sending it to him or if he was watching. But
I know.
glad that Kevin's back.
Through the whole experience, what it's been like to see all the support from, his friends and colleagues, from the fans. I know his Masson colleagues are in a tough spot. Guys like Jim Palmer and Ben McDonald, feeling they're not necessarily in a position to say anything on the air. Hopefully they've reached out to him independently. But, at some day when he's no longer with Masson and off doing better things, maybe he will talk about this, as John Miller reflected on his own experience with the Angelos family many years ago this week.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a wild story, and for Orioles fans, it'll be good to have him back.
The fight between Richard Deitch and John Arand and Andrew Marchand to get him on the podcast when he leaves Masson for ESPN. It's going to come to blows. Scott, where are you on that? We just get to call him. You got to get a podcast, man. That's where people go these days.
I'll probably wind up transcribing wherever you guys wind up.
Right.
Unless you can get tell Kevin I'd love to talk to him for the bog. If you can get that hookup, I'd appreciate it.
I'll mention it next time we chat. Scott Allen, everybody, DC Sports Bog, WashingtonPost.com/sports. Always great to chat, man. Let's hope something wacky happens soon so we can do it again.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Craig.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I've been trying to slide myself into this corner awkwardly over here when I could have just turned the computer the entire time and I have all this room to roam. Woo! No, nothing out of you?
I was just trying to see if I could do what you were doing.
If you had room to roam, if you could just push your chair away and all of a sudden be over here.
Yeah, Craig, we can't hear you now.
I'm back. Thanks again to Scott Allen for joining us. Again, tomorrow at this point in the show, we will not have a half hour left. We will have a full hour of radio left. Those are your hand on your head with joy, right, Anthony? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It looked for a second like that was pain.
Oh, no. Of course not.
Joy that we get to lead in to everybody watching. Preseason football!
Let's get it, baby!
Yeah! Oh, you're in a stance and
Let's
everything.
go!
You're in a stance and everything. What are those shorts, by the way? Those are sweet. Yeah. No, what are they?
I got them from Nike. I think they're Miami floral. I don't know.
That makes sense. That would track.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
Some Nikes, but I'm not endorsing it right now.
Yeah.
Unless
if they want.
Hey, look, if they want to sponsor,
They can send us some stuff. Yeah. I got. It's funny. So there's a brand that a lot of athletes are wearing now called Ryoko Rain. It's one of those if you know type of brands, but they make a couple of shorts that a little bit of a semblance of a Gucci pattern or a Versace pattern or whatever, like some of the luxury brands that I definitely on my radio salary do not have any of. And I've had multiple people ask me, when I wear them, they're like, "Are those Versace?" And I'm like, "No, they're Ryoko Rain." So if Ryoko Rain wants to sponsor the show, they can also sponsor the show.
I got to look into
Basically, if you're a clothing brand, you want to sponsor the show, we're open.
Yeah. I got to look into get me some.
You should.
Yeah.
You should. You've definitely seen me wear it.
I have. And I
Pretty
really
sweet.
like them. I inquired about them.
Yeah. Tatum wears them all the time.
Ooh.
His I think, are free. Mine are not. Mine are not. They could be if they want to sponsor the show, but they're currently not. All right. So last night, watched Hard Knocks season debut. Some of my favorite fall television is coming back. We got Hard Knocks is back. For whatever reason, this is the time of year that they decided to release Winning Time, the Showtime, or not Showtime, HBO show on the Lakers dynasty.
Yep.
Season 2, episode 1 has dropped. They just dropped the trailer for Welcome to Wrexham season 2. I believe that's dropping in September, which is going to be phenomenal. So there's a bunch of good sports television that is dropping right now. But Hard Knocks was interesting because, and I wonder, I don't want to criticize the series on one episode, but there was a lot of Aaron Rodgers love. And I was reminded pretty instantly why I was so frustrated with all of Aaron Rodgers' nonsense the last couple of years. Aaron Rodgers for the 2010s was my favorite quarterback in the league. I loved watching that dude play. People, I don't want to say people don't understand because, one, a lot of people listening are older than me. So, y'all know. But also, he still does this stuff. But, Rodgers was Mahomes before Mahomes. Mahomes does more crazy stuff than Rodgers does. But the, off-platform, ball zip, sidearm, all over the place stuff, and also just so fundamentally sound. Rodgers was doing all of that stuff that kind of almost laid a groundwork for Mahomes to come in and take it to an even higher level. Some of the different footwork, the way he moves in the pocket, all this stuff. And it's so fun to watch him play. And the ball just flies out of his hands. He sees throws that other quarterbacks don't. And he's a fun dude. He's thoughtful. And so when he goes on whatever podcasts and shows that he goes on and spews conspiracy theories and nonsense, I do my own research, and it's if you should do it in research journals with scientists if you want to research, not Reddit. Come on, man. And I think that's what, I was reminded of that because up until he started doing that stuff, that dude was probably my favorite player in the league. And then you're just like, oh, but you suck as a human. Damn. But like, I'd also understand why being his teammate would be awesome. And I am curious if there is a more critical eye on him and some of his off the field stuff later in the series, because episode 1 was just like an Aaron Rodgers praise fest, which it's NFL Films. Like, Hard Knocks is awesome, but like NFL Films makes it. There's only so far they're going to go into certain things. And even like, and hilariously, Anthony, the most critical, I guess is the best word I can use, critical person of Aaron Rodgers off the field was Aaron Rodgers, where at one point he referenced, the stuff that I do off the field. Of course, he's talking about his darkness retreats and his ayahuasca and, all the that stuff. Not necessarily that he spends his time going down Reddit rabbit holes and quote unquote doing his own research about, COVID vaccines and then lying about it. In case you forgot, that's what I'm talking about. So I don't know, man. Like, it was fun. They seem to be a very likable team. Sauce Gardner's super likable. Garrett Wilson's super likable unless you're trying to cover him. Rodgers, the way he's portrayed is super likable. And it was an enjoyable episode. And by the way, I love Saleh. Saleh's like, even you hear some of the position coaches and you hear them make speeches and stuff, you're just like, not that impressed. Like, okay, you're a standard issue football coach straight from Central Casting. Saleh, different dude. And like the eagle analogy they made to start the show, chef's kiss. Love it.
That was a good analogy. I really liked it. I didn't know where he was going with it at first. And I was like,
it was good.
I'm just glad he didn't call them the Eagles, though, because,
Right. That was funny because Rachel goes, I guess the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl again. They're going to win the Super Bowl this year.
that was funny. But did you find it funny when Aaron was asked, why do people hate going on Hard Knocks?
Yes.
Because I think he was asked about it like before the Jets were told that they were going to be on it. And he was like, he basically said he didn't want to be on it. And now he's on it again. So
yeah. Which is funny because the person that asked him, one of the cool parts of the episode, obviously at this point we're a little late for spoiler alert, but spoiler alert. Liev Schreiber, who is the voice of Hard Knocks, the voice of God.
Yeah.
Come and visits Jets camp. And it's the first time he's ever been to a Hard Knocks practice. It was very, very cool. And he asked him, he's like, why do people not like the show? And he's, extra attention. Aaron's like, I've had a great time with it. It's fun. My experience has been good. So I don't know. I've always wondered that. I think NFL Films does a good job, but it is something else. It's something else to get asked about. It is letting people into what is considered a private, sacred space. People don't want cameras in their meeting rooms and stuff like that. But it's all like the reason you get paid a bunch of money to play football is because it serves as entertainment. And so I don't know. And NFL, like, you get final say. It's not like you're giving out game plans. So I don't know, man. I think teams think way too much about it, read way too much into it. I think it's a great opportunity because, especially for like assistant coaches, right? If you come across really well on the show, or you all of a sudden, like, because other people in the league watch, maybe someone didn't know about you. But if you go out and do a crappy job, if your position group sucks during the season, then like, not gonna be like, oh, but I loved you on Hard Knocks. So I don't know, man. I just think it's entertainment. People have to be cogs in the machine, and I wish more people were willing to do it, but no one wants to do it, and it's stupid because it's a great show.
Yeah, and my favorite part, I think, of the episode in general was Aaron on the sideline helping Coach Zach Wilson up.
Yes,
and he's in his ear saying, "Yo, throw the fade to Malik."
I wonder if he was actually in his ear, or was he just saying that?
Oh,
because he had the headset on. And I'm not sure. That was actually something we were wondering when we were watching. I wasn't sure. It seemed like he was connected to Saleh for sure, but I don't know who he actually had access to. Because I think the person who's in the quarterback's ear is limited to one. Like, that is a special headset, and I don't think Rodgers had it. So I wonder if he was saying to Saleh or to the OC or to whoever, because he might have been talking to the person who was talking to Wilson, being like, throw it to Malik here.
Yeah.
But it is cool because you get to see that. The other thing that I think I really came to appreciate about Rodgers watching that is there's the part where he talks about the footwork with Wilson.
Oh, yep.
And he's like going through it. This is going to be impossible on radio to try to describe, but it's like when I catch the snap and he's already got his body kind of in position, I'm hot here. So if there's a blitz, he's hot. He catches the snap. He's ready. He's like, then on my first step, if my foot hits, I'm there. And so he's off to his first read, his non-hot read. Then he's like, second step here, hitch here, second hitch here. And you see how his brain works. And like, this is NFL quarterbacking, but how second nature it is to him at this point in his career and how seamless it is struck me as something that is not normal. The speed at which he can get through a progression. And we always talk about like the timing and rhythm of an offense. And a lot of offenses are designed this way, where the footwork is married to the progression and the read. But it's really hard to actually do. It's one of the things that makes NFL quarterbacking really hard. Like, I was talking about this with, who was I talking about this with the other day? It might have been Mitch. I think it was Mitch Tischler. It was someone at training camp. And we were talking about how there's like 17 guys on the planet that can play NFL quarterback at a decent level. Like, forget stars, forget good, forget great, just like decent. Once you get past like quarterback, let's even call it 22. I don't know if any of these guys are good. Like, traditionally, it's been about half the quarterbacks in the league are like kind of worth having, and everyone else is searching. That's 15 people on the whole freaking planet. Like, this is hard. And the ease with which he just is like, this, then this, then this, then this. And you see Wilson's wheels just spinning. Like, I know I'm going to get there. I've got to get this. But, like, whoa, that's how it's supposed to go? That was cool. That was really, really cool and really, really insightful. And I love stuff like that. I love when you get to just see how intricate football is. Because we, like, think about it. And not that it's not, like, at the end of the day, football is the Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan until you get hit in the face. And, like, you can blow up all these intricacies and all that stuff with physicality. But at just above its core, it's like physical, violence. But just above that is this incredible, like, strategic and tactical technique intricacy that really makes the game beautiful. And I just freaking love that stuff.
Is Hard Knocks going to make you an Aaron Rodgers fan again?
No.
I was just kidding.
No. Like, it will give me a greater appreciation for him as a football player.
Uh-huh.
But unless he does some better research,
yeah.
I think I'm out on A-Rod as a fan.
I was just curious.
Yeah. Fair question. And there's some people that are like, come on, man. I don't know, man. I don't forget that easily. And it's not like, just because they don't put his crackpot stuff on Hard Knocks doesn't mean it still doesn't exist. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, real things, real people said into real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. You're just on kind of in a mood this week. You're just in a let me throw curveballs, see what happens kind of mood this week.
Yep, pretty much.
All right. Well, that's a mood to be in, I guess. Any reason why?
When I told you about that shuffle button on YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm back there.
Okay. Well, we have a folder of music.
Yeah.
You can use without going to YouTube.
Okay.
I think we could add to the folder, and we could even add some random ones.
Okay.
But I think we should operate. I think we should operate from there.
All right, bet.
You know what else we should do?
Real things?
Real things throw people said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
How about a real things from me being part of the thing that got said into a microphone? I didn't say the important part. But Chick Hernandez, who's, of course, been in D.C. forever, former NBC Sports Washington, you'll see him tomorrow night calling the game for the Commanders on the preseasons on NBC4 with Logan, with B. Mitch. His nickname, as long as I've known him, has been Mr. Chick. I just figured, like, he's a I don't want to say he's like an older gentleman, because he's not. He's a young man. But he's been around for a hot second. He's a senior member of the beat, a senior member of the reporter clan, and so I just assumed it was a sign of respect for a guy that's been around longer than the rest of us. Turns out there's a story behind the nickname Mr. Chick, and we got it out of Chick on Take Command yesterday. We call him Mr. Chick. You might have heard of him, Chick Hernandez. Welcome to Take Command, man.
Do you know the origin of Mr. Chick?
I don't know the origin story of Mr. Chick.
So Alfred Morris gets drafted, and I'm the first person to get him. I go and get him from his hometown. Do a nice interview. I said, I'll see you in a few weeks for OTAs. OTAs happen. We go in the locker room. Alfred's got his back to us as he's getting himself prim and proper, and he turns around and looks at me and goes, "Oh, Mr. Chick." And at that point, I looked over at Mike Jones and John Keim and went, this is not good. I knew it was going to stick from that. I knew it. And as soon as we got out of the locker room, Jonesy's like, "Hey, Mr. Chick." I'm like, oh, here we go. And it stuck, and I put it on my Twitter handle. Makes more sense. So there's your origin.
That's great. It's also the last interview Alfred Morris ever did.
He did get a little grumpy.
He did. But the actual last interview Alfred Morris ever did was, I believe, in D.C. with me and Santana on the Santana Moss Show in 2016. So I'm actually the debunking of my own joke. How about a little bit from Channing Frye? Always very funny, always very interesting. Joe Mazzulla, the coach of the Celtics, under a lot of fire after last year. Channing talked about it on his podcast, Road Trippin'. I'm guessing there's probably a funny analogy or something being made in here. Yeah. Let's see what Channing said.
Mazzulla will be coaching the Celtics at this time next year. Truth or trash?
No, I think he will.
I think so too. I think now that they've made some roster changes, it's going to give him a little bit more leeway of like understanding what's happening with the league.
He's gonna be under a microscope though, Channing.
Oh, trust me, I was in Boston. Microscope, they up in his asshole like this. Listen, don't let him fart wrong. Gone.
I mean, some people like that.
Oh
my.
Allison.
Oh my. I don't even know if we can. Do we have to dump part of that? I don't know. It's not a topic on the show. I'm not up on the rules, Anthony.
I thought it was okay.
Allie Clifton. Yikes. I got nothing to add there. The Commanders' social media team, who's the funniest person in each position group?
Casey! The answer to the question is Casey.
Casey Toohill, apparently.
Right there.
You heard it here first. Hey, thanks, kid. Hey, that's a good rookie right there.
I can't really speak for anybody else's position group, but for ours, he's a clown. It's got to be Goose.
Oh, Rashad Wildgoose, funny guy.
Tight end group, Curtis.
Curtis
Running
Hodges.
back.
B-Rock.
B-Rock, okay. Didn't see that one.
Linebackers, Khalid Hassan, because he think he hit harder than me. I dang near want to give it to Danny. Running backs.
Is this who you want?
Running back. AG. You're not
Gibbs is pretty funny.
B-Rock funny.
B-Rock there.
He just naturally funny. Funniest teamer. 5. Funniest DB. Me. Funniest.
Who's that saying me?
Reeves.
That's hilarious. I was next to someone. I was next to John Allen, I think, when he did his. If you want the full thing, you have to go to the Commander's page and see if you can see me. All right, we'll see you for 3.5 hours tomorrow.
The Kevin Sheehan Show. Now weekdays from 10 to